What is going on? Welcome to our Liberty Bowl preview show here on Cyclone Fanatic, the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network. Many of you probably choosing to watch this on our YouTube feed. If you haven't done that yet, I would highly suggest subscribing to it. We're doing a lot more on YouTube compared to the old days and looking forward to growing there. Coming up in the show, Brent Blum is going to join me. We'll take a deep dive into Memphis, this matchup, what we think will happen with the Cyclones of Memphis in the Liberty Bowl. In the first segment, Jeff Woody is going to hop in. I want to talk about bowl prep, specifically with the young football team. What have, the last couple of weeks looked like for Iowa State? It's been a very good month of December as far as not having guys leave. There's a lot of positive stuff. So Jeff Woody is going to join me to talk about that. Of course, we couldn't do all of our postseason coverage without our great sponsors, Fairway Meat and Grocery, Carl Auto Group, Wild Rose Casinos in Jefferson, Emmitsburg, and also our friends in Clinton. And we also have a new sponsor here on Cyclone Fanatic, and it is Keen Project Solutions, pioneering the future of industrial agriculture. Engineers and project managers, if you're out there, our friends at Keen Project Solutions are hiring. They give you a team where your passion for ag drives innovative engineering and construction. Their website is Think Different, Think Keen.com. That is Think Different, Think Keen.com, Keen. And we're going to be telling you more and more about them over the next month or so here on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network. All right, let's get to Jeff Woody. We'll bring him on and start to break down this Liberty Bowl matchup between Iowa State and Memphis right after this here on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network.
Frank, when you think Fairway, you think fresh. Is that the winning culture you've tried to create?
Penelope Pineapple, what an unbelievable produce performance. How does your team stay so fresh?
Sunkissed Orange. Is it true Fairway has offered the freshest produce in town since 1938?
What can we say? Our produce is so fresh, we're speechless.
All right, Liberty Bowl preview show here on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network. Of course, we are streaming as well everywhere. YouTube. I believe we're on Instagram now, Twitter, and Facebook. Yeah.
That's a come up, man.
We're on the Instagram now. I got Jeff Woody with me here in segment number one. I'm going to focus a lot on Iowa State here in this specific segment. We'll get more into Memphis and what that matchup entails in coming segments. First of all, Jeff, you never played in Memphis. Were you on that?
Yeah, I did.
You did. You were on that team.
The first Liberty Bowl. Liberty
That
Bowl round
was
one.
the crazy Steele Jantz, Jared Barnett, Jerome Tiller.
Sam Richardson. Tiller was gone by then, but it was Sammy Rich and Barnett and Steele. That was we had three quarterbacks playing that game, I'm pretty sure.
Weren't there like illnesses?
Sam was sick.
Yeah.
And I don't remember, there was somebody else that was ill, but like that was, and it was also like 40 and rainy that day. So like it was brutal. The game day itself, and we lost. So like the game day itself was not super enjoyable.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That was to Tulsa. Didn't
Yes.
Iowa State play Tulsa earlier that year?
I don't remember. I don't think it was that year. I think they played the next year.
Okay.
Like
there was some crossover with Tulsa.
Yeah, we had played. It was either that year or the next year, and we actually talked about that on Fart, which I think last week. And my stat line on that game was 6 carries for 12 yards and 3 touchdowns.
It's the most Jeff Woody.
That is
workman-like.
Perfect. We got the ball. I think it was the third time like we got the ball on like the 1 or 2 yard line, and
the old bulldozer.
they threw me back in, and it was sort of like, I know what's going to happen here. Like, come on, guys, can I just make this easy? So ended up. Yeah, six carries, 12 yards, 3 touchdowns.
So I wanted to talk to you in this bowl special about
the best recipes for ribs.
Oh, dry. and spicy.
Yeah, that's the Memphis way.
Yeah, that's
Kansas City and Texas barbecue saucier. Memphis is the dry rub.
I will go to war that Memphis has the best barbecue.
See, I'm a Kansas City guy, but I can appreciate the meat is better in Memphis. But like I'm a big sauce guy.
I hate the sauce.
Sauce guy.
Hate is a strong word, but I prefer it dry. Regardless, so I am very on the record that I think most of these bowls are just like it's fun. I like watching them. I will watch them, but it doesn't matter like it used to within these programs because of the portal and because the players are kind of onto it, right? Like these guys, it doesn't mean as much to them, so they all sit out. And we generally don't know a lot about teams going into these bowl games. However, that's not the case for Iowa State this year. I'll make the argument that it's an incredibly big game for the Cyclones with the amount of guys coming back, 20 starters coming back to next year's team. I think all of those guys will play in the bowl game. We'll wait and see on TJ Tampa. I would guess he's probably going to sit out of this one.
Again, as he should. As we talked about that in FAR last week. I hope he sits out. We don't need to go any further in that, but
makes sense.
Yeah,
makes total sense for him. He needs a big combine. He could potentially be a first or second round draft pick in the NFL draft. I guess having been through these bowl practices, though, to me, it has always been a thing where I kind of roll my eyes a little bit with it because I always felt like coaches probably overplayed it a little bit, but not with this team, Jeff. There's so many freshmen and sophomores that need more reps. I don't know. I think this is a really important 3-week stretch for Iowa State.
Well, I think there's two reasons why bowls are really important, and specifically now and specifically for this team, which is, when like childhood delinquencies and like kids will get arrested or get in trouble or whatever, and that number goes down if they're in a sport or in an after-school activity. It's because you're making a kid productive at a time when they could otherwise be destructive. Well, that's the transfer portal right now, where if you're a team that's in a bowl game and there's a guy who's like, there are people, like a guy like Dylan Gabriel on the high side of going to chase some money, and a guy like Cartavius Norton on the other side of it, which appropriately, like Norton landing, I forget the exact school he landed at, but like Charlotte being the dude at Charlotte is better than being, even at his best, he is getting 10 carries a game, splitting with Sama, like at his best. So you could be the guy at a school, or you could be a guy at this one. Those two instances, those guys are for sure going to transfer. But there's a whole lot of guys that are sort of like in this gray area in the middle who could be lured away by some offer, or one of his high school teammates is now transferring from this school to that school and he might go to this school. Well, if you're at bowl practice, much less of those temptations exist. So you're going to be much more productive, and you're going to reduce the amount of guys potentially that could be looking elsewhere, which then brings a whole lot of like culture problems and whatever. So being in a bowl game now reduces the amount of the fringe guys from transferring. Again, there will be the Gabriels, there will be the Nortons. We're going to transfer regardless. But that's part number one. And part number two is sort of with this team specifically, there's a billion freshmen and a billion sophomores and a billion red shirts.
Yeah.
Guys that are redshirting right now who haven't really been able to play in any meaningful snaps because, you get it's 4 total games. Let's say they've played in 2, and he's a secondary guy who sort of rotated in the UNI game and then again in, XYZ game later in the year, hasn't really had a lot of chance to shine. Well, they're going to be taking guys that are starters because Jeremiah Cooper, good player. You ain't going to get much better between the Kansas State game and Memphis. Cooper, let's just make sure you don't turn an ankle or pull a hamstring or do anything like that in practice. So we're going to keep our guys that we know really don't have a lot of improvement towards the end of the year or are banged up or both. We're going to take those guys, and your starters pretty much aren't going to participate in your live practices. What that means is that all the rest of the guys, those 3s, those 4s, those red shirts, those walk-ons, they start getting reps in practice.
A guy like J.J. Cole.
Gets a ton of reps. Guys that fill in the blank that are safeties or backup linebackers, or like Carson Willick. Like Carson Willick's played in a lot of games, but he's like been a sort of a spot player because Will McLaughlin, has been so good at that outside linebacker position. Well, now Carson Willick is going to be the guy. He's probably going to take most of the number 1 reps against either the 1s or 2s on the other offense. He then gets to see what it's like to be on the field for 12 straight plays in a practice. The coaches get to see what he does when he gets tired, where his tendencies are. You can learn so much from the guys that are barely, walk-on guys that are trying to make a name for themselves and get on special teams come spring ball. But there's also the guys like Carson Willick that are really good players that get a chance to be the guy because the other people are off the starters are getting less reps.
That's what I was curious about, because I mean, let's compare this to the Cheez-It Bowl year, Iowa State's last
with a
bowl
zillion
game.
seniors.
Yeah, like that bowl prep feels different in the sense that, I mean, I can't imagine Brock Purdy was really doing anything during prep for that other than, walking through some stuff,
taking mental reps.
Yeah. When you have this many true freshmen playing, do you still sit the starters out in the reps like you do in the Cheez-It Bowl one? Or do these guys play more and more because they're so young?
It depends on who they are and how they've been doing. Like if it's, let's take a freshman, like Sama. Abu is probably going to take a good number of reps because his total rep count throughout the year isn't really that high. That dude needs reps. Carson Hansen and Sama are taking the lion's share of the reps. And then the Harris kid is going to be probably with the twos. So it's Harris and then, somebody else might be with the twos.
Hansen's a good one that can really benefit from this.
Yeah, Hansen and Sama are going to be taking the lion's share of the reps at running back because they're both freshmen. They played a lot, but they both they don't have a lot of rep tally. Then you flip that over against a guy who's name a freshman. Like let's take Jeremiah Cooper, for example. He's technically a sophomore, but he is a guy who we know what he is. We know that he's good. We don't really have any. Ben Bramer's another one.
Yeah.
I bet Bramer's a better example. I bet Bramer he's not taking a lot of reps in practice. He's doing a lot of individual, a lot of blocking work and making sure schematically he knows where he's going to be. But we've seen enough from Ben Bramer that he doesn't need to take a lot of reps. So it's sort of dependent upon the person. And could they benefit? Is the risk of them turning an ankle 2 weeks before the actual game, is the benefit that they can gain from that practice, does that exceed the risk? And it feels like for some guys, yes, for some guys, no. And if there is some guys that are sort of on the fence, like a Black, the guard.
Yeah, Brendan
Black. He's probably a guy who's resting more than he's playing, but there are certain situations where I'm sure they watch him on film and it's like, hey, against odd fronts, you struggled. So we're going to give you live reps against odd fronts and make sure that you get good rep practice against that. But once we get to Memphis, if they run an even front, we're going to take you out. It doesn't matter. You're not going to scrimmage. You don't need these reps. So there's guys, any continuum from Rocco, who ain't playing a damn thing live.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's guys like, again, Abu Sama, who's going to take a ton of reps because he needs a ton of reps.
It's fascinating. When do you actually, as a team, start focusing on the opponent in these bowl practices?
I think it's usually like after finals is sort of when, at least with Rhodes, that we sort of start introducing. And it's sort of like a slow introduction where it's not like you're diving. It's all Iowa State before finals, and then after finals, it's all Memphis. Where it was sort of, you would have a walkthrough before practice that says, here's their defensive front. They're a 3-down team. They like to walk up. And this is number 17. If you see number 17, he's where the blitz side's coming from. Let's walk through some of their pressures. All right, we're going to cover this more tomorrow. And then we go practice Iowa State. And the next day you do a walkthrough and you do scout period, but then you're still scrimmaging against each other. And then after that, you kind of go full Memphis, and Colin said it last week on Fart that you want to have that installed by the time you get there, and then you polish it while you're at the bowl site. So you're not doing install and having these big, long meetings trying to say, here's what their coverages are going to be if they're in these fronts. Because if you do that, then you're taking away from where the bowl experience is, and kids are going to be distracted anyway. So you want to have it installed before you get to the bowl site, and then you want to practice it and polish it once you actually get there. So there doesn't have to be a ton of thought, and you can just use the bowl week as like, it's a celebration of the season.
Do the players, when you went to the bowl game and you get Tulsa, which is like a group of 5 school, when Iowa State gets Memphis, do the players, how much do they care about that? Because the fans are like, oh, it's a letdown. But I would make the argument that Abu Sama didn't play Memphis last time. Like, I mean, that was 5 years ago. Like, this is a 9-3 football team that's capable of putting up a lot of points on you.
I think it would be more fun when you get a higher name brand, like
Auburn was one of the ones I thought they may get.
That'd be kind of fun. And so like initially, when we played against Liberty, or played in the Liberty Bowl against Tulsa, that was a letdown because had we won against West Virginia in 2012, we would have had a much higher bowl position. And I actually fumbled that game away. So that one, like the feeling of bowl release or the bowl release.
That was a really cold game, right?
Horrible. It was horrible. And it was, like that game, we had just come off a heartbreaking loss. And then also, I think Jaquez was hurt and Gage Schaefer was in at safety. And Tavon Austin
messed up.
Had a bum shoulder. And so Tavon Austin like housed a touch, like a game winner.
I remember
so you're coming off that.
That was the Geno Smith and Wally Burnham moment.
Yeah, that was that. So like
classic.
That
Vintage.
instance. Yeah. But that instance, it felt different because you're like, man, we could have had X. Had we won, we would have been in, Phoenix or whatever. And now we're going to be in Memphis against Tulsa. So like the comparison was the problem, but I don't think this team has that comparison. They won their way up to where they're going to be. And there wasn't really another option of like, had we won XYZ 2 months ago, then we could have changed this. So I think they're going to be happy with it as regardless of who it is.
Yeah. I would make the argument that this is a really big game because of one, nobody really thought they would be here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
In general, we had the whole gambling thing all off season. Just a weird deal. You lose the Ohio game, right? And everything.
Replacing your whole entire offensive staff,
right? So it's a big win, I think, for everybody in that program. But two, it just feels eerily similar to 17, and we kind of said that even in the preseason before we'd even seen a snap that it felt like a building year, not a rebuilding year, but a building year for what was to come because you knew how many young guys you were going to have to play. And again, like I just think so if they lose to Memphis, does it mean they're going to suck next year? Absolutely not. But if you win this game, you really do have something to build on because it's the same guys. Like this isn't like, and maybe even more so than the last Liberty Bowl because it was like, well, Lazard's leaving and
Joel's done.
Yeah, you know, like there was like an end of an era. This is kind of just it's an exhibition game, but
you're playing with house money.
Yeah, you can take a lot from it if you win the thing.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about it is that the more practice this team gets to be together. So one of the things that I really like about the offensive staff changes, and the defensive staff has kind of always done this, when they switched to that 3-4, it's because this is the defense that our team has the pieces to actually execute. And I call this the square peg, square hole problem, which is you can then take what does your offense do, and we're going to just make an offense that does that. We're not going to try and make them be Tennessee's offense. We're not going to be Josh Heupel and run everybody, a foot from the sideline and have a quarterback chuck it 90 yards down the field. But we're also not going to try and be Navy and run a triple option. What does this offense do? Okay, Rocco makes quick reads. You got a lot of guys that are going to just be in the right spot. If you can get them playmakers like Jalen Knoll or Bramer the ball quickly, then we're going to be able to execute well. Our guys pull really well blocking scheme-wise, so let's run more of that. So, okay, that's the offense that we want to do, and this team kind of got to create that towards the end of the season. They figured out what the offense wanted to be a square peg, square hole. You get 4 or 5 more weeks of that, and then coming into that offseason, if you're able to execute that offense, again, to ride this thing on a high note, you then can discover more of what you do well, and then teach to that. You can start installing this offense that works as opposed to trying to figure it out on the fly. So offensively, this is, I think, a bigger thing than the defense because defense, it's blocking or, it's tackle and fit. But like the offense, I think that's the big part is the confidence you can build and the more you can learn about what does this offense look like with Abu? Like if Sama can be this downhill, slasher home run hitter of a runner, how can we build play action off of this? How can we do things off this offense?
Carson into that too.
Exactly.
He's more of this patient, methodical type guy.
Way better blocker.
Yeah.
So he's the he is the Jyrell Brock to Abu's Brees.
We haven't got to talk much scheme this year. One of the fun things for me is I've become much more of an NFL fan in the last 10 years, and I know why. It's because of the offenses. There's just so much more of there's elements of air raid in pretty much every NFL offense that you watch now.
And you're a sucker for air raid.
I am. I'll do anything for air raid. I've never watched an Iowa State team. I've always watched Iowa State teams and go, how did that guy get so wide open all the time when it comes to the opposition? When you're playing Gundy, the Leach teams back in the day, all these great
Lincoln
Riles
Riley.
team, the Riley teams. Yeah. Like That son of a gun is just open. How are their receivers? There's nobody within 10 yards of them all the time. And you watch it in the NFL right now, and we're watching all these quarterbacks that are hurt. And still, these really good offensive minds, Kevin O'Connell with the Minnesota Vikings is a great example. They're on their 4th quarterback right now. And I'm watching this game, and this Nick Mullins, and he's making these awful decisions, and he's never played before. And, like, Josh Dobbs comes in, never, he'd been with the system for like 3 days, and these guys are wide open. Okay. And what does that tell me? Well, really good scheme, a really good game plan. These coaches you can do this now in football at any level because of the way the rules are. It is very offensive driven. For the first time covering Iowa State in my life, Iowa State was that team this year. It's like, God, nobody was within 10 yards of Knoll right there. And then you have the players that can actually do something with it when they get it. We've had really good wide receivers at Iowa State before, but I don't remember Alan Lazard being that wide open. I don't remember Hakeem Butler being that wide open. And
Hakeem Butler had to kill people to get
I mean, he's running past them, and you had to hit him in stride. And I guess my point is, I think Iowa State's out scheming most of these teams that they're playing, and it's super awesome to watch. Like, and I can't wait. I think they're going to put up a lot of points in this football game.
The thing that I think so too. And so when you thought like Memphis specifically, it is a strength on strength and a quote weakness on weakness. But I think Iowa State's weakness is better than Memphis's. So strength being Memphis is the 7th highest scoring team in college football, offensive strength. Iowa State, I don't know the ranking in defensive points allowed because it's a little skewed based on tempo and stuff like that, but they're pretty good on defense. And so you have Memphis' offense versus Iowa State's defense. That's going to be kind of a heavyweight slugfest. I think I would still take the edge to John Haycock and being able to scheme away from that, but Memphis is going to score. They're good. Yeah. But Iowa State's offense versus Memphis' defense, I think that is going to be a much less fair fight than what I think the otherwise would be. But the thing with the scheme, football is both more and less complex than what people make it. It is less complex in the what you should do. It is more complex in the how you should do it. So the what you should do, if you have more guys on one side of the ball than they do, run it there. If you have better leverage, if you want to run left and all your guys are to the left of where the defensive is, great, run that way. If you don't. Like, it's not that hard. And the thing that guys like Shanahan and the head coach of the Dolphins, guys like that, which all kind of come from the same tree, but then the Lincoln Riley and the Josh Heupels and those guys, they just do that common sense stuff way more frequently than what people do. Herman was good at that. We just didn't. I mean, admittedly, I'm not Abu Sama. Like, we just didn't have the same pieces.
No, you are not.
I am not.
Same high school, though.
Technically, I still have the rushing records because he missed like 8 games in his senior year.
There you go, my man.
Yep. Still, had he played his whole year, he would have crushed every record in that. I mean, receiving records too. But anyway, they just more consistently. What Herman would do is run it till they stop it. If we think that Darius Reynolds is better than their corner, how do we position it so we get a 1-on-1? Do that. All right, that's not that complicated. Our guy's better than your guy. Let's go do that. So it feels like that type of radical common sense is what the NFL into college and the college into the NFL does with RPOs, with with a lot of motions. A lot of stuff is, I want to throw it to Christian McCaffrey. How do I throw it to Christian McCaffrey with him having the least amount of obstruction into where he's throwing it? Okay, well, let's motion him 6,000 times because then you can't follow him. All right, well, it seems pretty straightforward. Like, it's just, again, it's radical common sense.
I always feel like you football guys just overthink things too.
Yeah, right? Everybody does. Yeah. It's not that hard.
Because I mean, I've seen it. Like, they sit in there in these rooms, and you're analyzing the first step of a backup left tackle for 2 hours, and it's like, you can do that to yourself with anything in life. The more time you spend on it.
Yeah. I will say the how part is more complex than people give it credit for. Yeah. So like we are recording this somewhere in the week where the Eagles and the Seahawks played a Monday night game. And the first play of the Seahawks offense, they tried to run a toss and it got absolutely blown up. Well, it's because DK Metcalf was supposed to come down on a crack block on the defensive end, and his alignment was too wide, and his first step was trash. Well, those two things, if it doesn't seem like being a foot too wide or your first step being 12 inches in the wrong spot. It doesn't seem like those things would cause a big problem, but they absolutely do. So what you need to do, like on paper, the what you should run, that was the right front to run that play against. The person who executed it didn't follow the details they needed to actually get that done. So schematically, football is simpler than people make it. Execution-wise, it takes a way more detail, and the smallest mistake can cause a catastrophic failure. So the how is much more complex than people give it credit for. The what, people overthink all the time. Just, hey, we want to throw it to our best guy. How do we get our best guy against their worst guy? Just do that a zillion times. That's what Lance Leipold does at Kansas. That's why they're so good. Is where's our best defensive end? Well, or where's our best wide receiver? Let's put him on their worst one.
It's the epitome of Leach and Hal Mummy and all those guys. The quarterback made every decision. I mean, they only have like 5 plays on those air raid, and it's backyard football. And they get to the point where it's just the quarterback. And I actually think it may be difficult in 2023 to do this because there's not as much continuity with quarterbacks and wide receivers. But you remember when you were a kid in the backyard and maybe your quarterback told you to, all right, go and run a curl, but you're like, I can beat this guy. And you kind of just motion to him like, no, I'm going deep now. And you do the curl and go. That's it.
Yeah.
Like the receiver is tasked with finding the open space.
You want to know a magic trick too? Why is Travis Kelce the greatest tight end and greatest receiving tight end in NFL history? He just does that.
Yeah.
Like, in any given play.
They're just communicating. Him and Mahomes have such a good relationship too.
That's it. So
they can read each other.
Let's say he's supposed to run a corner route. Well, if the guy who's supposed to be covering him, a corner route meaning you're breaking to the sideline. Well, if the guy who's supposed to be covering him is outside leverage, you'd have to run through him to get to where that spot is. That's not a good place on the field. It's not going to be available. So he just turns it around, and instead of going to the sideline, he just sits in the middle of the field. Completely changes the route on the fly. And him and Mahomes just trust the fact that they're going to see the same thing at the same time. So every once in a while, you're going to get a play where it looks like Mahomes is throwing it to absolutely nowhere, or Travis Kelce is like in this like 1 foot away from another receiver. It's just because they just backyard football it and saying that we're going to run this route. Here's what your base route's supposed to be. But based on where the coverage is going to be or how this guy screwed up the coverage that should be there, I'm just going to sit in a place that's open. And that exactly, it's making it easier.
Yeah.
The what is easier. The how is harder.
I'm guessing, I don't know this for sure, Iowa State had elements of that with Noel this year. Just the way he was able to find space in a bunch of different areas.
Yeah, and just comfortably sit down. Where do you want to give Rocco? Give Rocco the 1-3. Your numbers. Give him the biggest 1-3 that you possibly can, and Rocco's going to put it somewhere on you.
He's accurate enough too where this can work. That's the one key with the quarterback. They don't have to have Joe Burrow's arm, but they have to be accurate.
Well, and this is another thing, and it's why Brock is so successful. Any offense functions best when the decisions you make are confident and correct. If you can make confident, correct decisions, it's going to look boring. Like it's going to look like you're not doing anything. In the same way that like really good wrestlers, they win matches. Like David Carr, he wins so many wrestling matches, like 13-3 or whatever, because no one can score on him because he's just fundamentally sound. So it's kind of boring to watch.
Boring is good.
Boring is good. Where you win the game or you win the match 6-1 because there's nothing that really happens. That's what good offense should be. Is it doesn't look like there's much happening. You're like, they have 42 points? How? That's what it should be.
Congratulations on the baby girl.
Thank you. She's adorable.
I'm sure she is. Hopefully she looks like her. She has to look like her mom then.
Yeah, mostly. She's got my nose, and that's about it.
Appreciate you, my man. We'll be back here on the Liberty Bowl preview show here on Cyclone Fanatic. Brent Blum's going to join me next here, and we'll break down. We'll look more at this Memphis team, more of this individual matchup for the Cyclones. Hey, Cyclone Fanatics, it's Chris Williams here, and happy holidays. Listen, every year I get people asking me, how can I gift a Cyclone Fanatic subscription? Well, technically, there's not a way to do it, but today I'm going to show you a workaround. And I promise you, this is a great gift for that Cyclone fan in your life who just can't get enough of the clone. They're obsessed with the clones. They want to know the inside scoop. That's what we provide each and every day via our Patreon page with Cyclone Fanatic. I'm going to show you an easy way to give one of these things as a gift. The first thing you need to do is head to patreon.com/cyclonefanatic. If you're already a patron, make sure to sign out of your account first. And then you need to decide on which tier to purchase. You need to create a new Patreon account for the recipient to use as a patron. There you can enter their name, email, and password for that person you would like to gift the subscription to. Make sure and write down the login information so that you can pass this along. Patreon will send a confirmation for you to enter. If you're trying to surprise somebody, or if you're unsure of what email to use, you can always create a new email address to be used specifically for this Patreon account to share as well. Enter their country, state, and zip code along with the payment information. Give a gift certificate that you can find at the link below. Log into Patreon and change the email address for the recipient's email. Just delete your credit card from the account whenever you would like them to begin paying. That's it. It's really not that hard. I promise you, whoever the Cyclone fan is in your life is going to absolutely love this Cyclone Fanatic subscription for the holidays. We appreciate it because we are a 100% locally owned company. Everything that you give via your Patreon subscription, it goes back into us creating awesome content for Cyclone fans, not only all over the state of Iowa, but across the world. Thanks so much and happy holidays. All right, we thank Jeff Woody for bringing us that. We focused a lot on Iowa State in that first segment of our Liberty Bowl preview show here on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network. Of course, we are presented by our amazing sponsors, Fairway Meat and Grocery, Carl Auto Group, Keene Construction, and of course our friends over at Wild Rose Casino in Jefferson, Emmitsburg, and Clinton. I want to bring in Brent Blum to do a little bit more on Memphis as we lead up into what I think, Brent, is a really nice bowl game for Iowa State. And you're talking to a guy who probably is as critical of the Bulls as anybody. That's me. I'll raise my hand. But with what it represents for this Iowa State team, I think it really matters. And I would make the same case for Memphis too. I know it's not the sexiest opponent, but as we look at this Memphis team, they've got a few guys out, but most of their team is back from the year, and they went 9-3, a really good offensive football team, and they're looking to build on beating a Power 5 opponent in their home stadium. Big game for them.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think you look at it from their side, and they do not get the chance to play Power 5 opponents in their home stadium very often. They've had a traditional series with Mississippi that's been very entertaining over the last 15 years. But for them, C-Dub, I know you're a big realignment guy, but you start talking about the next wave of realignment and adding schools, and you better believe Memphis wants in that conversation. So how do you prove your value here? Is number one, you sell out your stadium for the bowl game, which it sounds like Memphis is going to be very well represented. So Iowa State fans better show out as well. But then secondly, you need to be competitive in football. And you know that basketball program, if Penny's still around, they'll be competitive. But football, you're still not sure. They win 9 games this year, but for them, a statement win would be big. They just, even through the great years they've had under Norvell and on the current staff, they just haven't really had a bunch of marquee wins. Well, this would be one of them. I think at Iowa State, you can kind of get caught up in, what about Iowa State? It's like, well, look from the other side. This is a great opportunity for Memphis at home in front of its people to beat a Big 12 team that won 7 games this year.
Yeah, and the crowd part's interesting. I actually think that Memphis will have a substantial crowd advantage in this one. I mean, they should. It's in their hometown, but the difference in this one and 2017 though is Iowa State fans were just so hungry for any type of success. Not that they're not still. I just don't think you're going to see that split down the middle crowd. Do you?
No, I mean, last I heard, Iowa State ticket sales were going fine, but it's not anywhere near 2017. So that means 2 things. Yes, I believe Memphis will have it's not going to be, like a road game. This will be closer to 60-40, 70-30, I would guess. Secondly, that means more beer available on Beale Street, though. So that's a good thing. Yeah, I'm just looking, I'm looking at the bowl situation for Memphis. And since it played Iowa State in 17, lost to Wake Forest, lost to Penn State, beat Florida Atlantic, beat Utah State. So even in Memphis's climb here, they have not defeated a Power 5 team in a bowl game. So this is a big deal for them, and I think their fans are going to be ready to go and charged up. And from what I understand, the excitement down there is, hey, Iowa State, almost traveled. We almost had more fans than we did for our game, and almost embarrassed them on Beale Street for that parade. So I think you'll see not that it's going to be adversarial, but I think Memphis will be really, really well represented.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Shout out to Fairway Meat and Grocery. Remember them over all of your holidays. New Year's coming up, of course, for your something. We're gonna have nice weather. Throw something out on the smoker from our friends at the Fairway Meat Market.
Hey,
And
I got a quick announcement on the fairway front. You ready for
what's
this?
that?
This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
this is somewhat new news to be heard of more. We now are selling We Will frozen pizzas at the South Fairway in Ankeny. Portion of the sales. It's hard to miss. There's a big We Will label on it. So look for that
That's
in the
pretty cool.
frozen
I knew
pizza
this was
section.
coming.
Yeah, it's
That's
first. Our trial run is at the South Fairway, or the South Ankeny Fairway. So appreciate the people at Fairway. Hope to be in more stores here soon. I'll keep you posted.
that's pretty awesome. All right, frozen
Yeah,
pizza game.
that's
Look at
right.
this.
That's right.
All we have to do is drink a ton of beer and eat frozen pizza, and Bloom can do his job. Just
Exactly.
fantastic.
Get some post players in the portal.
Also, our friends at Carl Auto Group for sponsoring us as well. What scares you? Well, real quick, the profile on Memphis for those who haven't watched them much. Elite offensive team, can throw the ball around. Not elite defensive team. They're not good against the run. I also think it's important to note they have a couple of offensive linemen out in this game. And you know me, Brent, I'm like probably the least confident guy you'll ever find when it comes to this stuff. I'm really confident in Iowa State in this game. Does anything scare you? What am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, just the offensive firepower that Memphis has. And I think if it's a race to 30 points, I think Memphis has the firepower to get there, even on Iowa State's defense. And the closer we get to this game, it's more and more likely that TJ Tampa will not play, I would say. So they've got guys. I mean, Joe Skates, we know well, the legends of Joe Skates at Iowa State. He's one of the
Yep.
receivers. He's not their main guy, but they've got skill guys. And so if this thing gets up into the mid 30s, I think Iowa State can score. You saw it against K-State, but that was a weird game. You saw it against BYU. BYU was kind of in an odd spot at that point. Can Iowa State's offense get up to the 30s and 40s? I think that part will be interesting, and that's what would scare me. If this gets a real high-scoring game, Memphis has some real firepower here.
I would like to know more about their offensive line depth, and this is part of the problem too with like just general media anymore. I always learn this when we did play-by-play for the women. It's just hard to get information on
Yeah.
teams now because there's just not that many people on the beat on a daily basis. It's hard to learn a lot about this Memphis team. I'm coming to know what interests me about their offense is it seems very, very strong systematically, scheme wise. Feels like they're really good. I mean, this is a holdover from Mike Norvell,
Yep.
so it's not like
Silverfield.
they're
Yep.
right, really good at what they do. The losing two linemen feels like a bigger deal than just what I know about Iowa State's defense is if you can get pressure with three, boy, it changes everything. And if there's backups in there, Dom Orange coming off of a month rest, like I feel like this leans Iowa State.
And I think that's where the game is won or lost. Is because honestly, what was Iowa State's concern for most of the year defensively was the lack of pressure.
Yep.
And it's harder with three when you're rushing three. That's just the case. It's easier to block three than four. So we'll see what Iowa State tries to do, because if they give Hennigan time, who's the quarterback for Memphis, I mean, Hennigan threw for 3,500 yards this year, super productive. They threw for over 300 yards per game. Yes, it was in its conference, not quite the same as the Big 12, but you throw for 300 yards per game. Generally, the adage is it's easier to find pass blockers as backups than run blockers. So if they can hold up just well enough, I think their skill guys are good enough to to match up with Iowa State's secondary, who's really good. But if Iowa State can get pressure and cause chaos for that backup offensive line, then good luck throwing. So I think that's where the game is won or lost. I don't see a world where Memphis is going to run for 175 plus in this game. I think they're going to have to throw it. And if Iowa State can get pressure, you can cause havoc, create some turnovers. And I think this could be an Iowa State win by double digits.
The other aspect of this is just Memphis not being a great run stopping team.
No.
And, there's two aspects of Iowa State where I was fairly critical of them early in the year for doing the whole square peg round hole thing when it came to running the football. But then we really did see at the end of the year where that offensive line was not only competent, but dominated against Kansas State. Now that was a weird game, right? With all the snow and everything. But I think that group is a totally different one than we saw at the beginning of the year. And boy, if we've seen it now, the BYU game, which is a team with a similar profile, I think, of Memphis. We saw it in the Kansas State game, where if Iowa State can run the ball and they can get downhill, then all of a sudden, those receivers, and they're just wide open because I think Shieldhouse has drawn up some phenomenal plays down the stretch here. What are the chances we see Abu Sama with 150 yards in this one?
I think that's what Iowa State's going to lean on right away, and you don't stray. Rocco can sling it. We know that. Another game, Chris, I think sets up like this one is the Baylor game down in Waco. Now that had some rain, but Memphis's profile is pretty similar defensively to what Baylor brought to the table. I mean, I think you get Sama going. I mean, clearly that's if you can run it, you don't stray from it, and you just keep the ball away from Memphis, honestly. And I know Iowa State's going to try and do that early, and we'll see. The games Iowa State has struggled offensively, though, is when the ground game does not get established. And, like the Texas game, Iowa State felt like it labored a little bit. Kansas was not a great run defense. Iowa State struggled that first half. So I don't think we're at the point with the Cyclones, and I hope we get there next year, where you can just, plan on 200 yards rushing. Like, you'll still have to see it. I mean, Brendan Black's gotten better. You've seen some of these guys really grow, but it's not like this is the Michigan offensive line either. So I think Iowa State's got to obviously try to run it first. If it can run, I think it's a big day for Abu and a big day for the Iowa State offense, because then you get the play action going and look out. If you can't run, though, that's where it gets super interesting. That elongates the game, potentially means more points on the board. And then if you get into a skill game with Memphis, that's where they're really good. So I think that's the side of Iowa State's end, is you want to run it. If you can't, I think we could see a game go down to the wire.
Yeah. I think it all makes a lot of sense.
I would say that the other two key players for Iowa State, Higgins and Bramer, because
Bramer's that guy.
Yeah, you look at the Memphis defense, not a lot of size on the back end, and if you can get Bramer going, I mean, Steve O'Klotz had a great year too. I mean, the Iowa State tight end room does not get talked about enough how much it has changed how Iowa State can attack, because those guys not only can make plays via the air, but Steve O'Klotz and Ben Bramer and Easton Dean turned into really good blockers by the end of the year too. And so that could present a big problem for Memphis's really light secondary and linebackers.
We're all going to be down there, looking forward to it. We sold out our Jerry the King Lawler party in like 20 hours. Our premium subscribers ate that thing up. We can't wait. Talk me off of it. I like Iowa State by double digits in this game. I always look for the negative, like which matchup do I hate here? I really like the way this sets up for the Cyclones. And I'm a guy too who told you when I first looked at this matchup, I said I'd take the points. I think Memphis plays a game here. The two offensive linemen being out really bother me. I think that's a bigger loss than even Tampa, knowing what Iowa State can put in there behind him. They're pretty good at that spot. One guy out. Brent, I just think this game really matters to Iowa State.
Yeah.
I think it's a highly, highly motivated team. I think they're looking at next year thinking we can win a Big 12 championship potentially, and this is a stepping stone to that.
Yeah, and I'll say this would be the exclamation point on what has been a really awesome month of December for the future of Iowa State football. So, I mean, I think that's the way you look at it. Is Iowa State is ready to go. Literally, see to I think again, who knows what can change? There's still another portal in April, but Iowa State kept pretty much every single person it wanted to keep, which is a testament to the staff, a testament to the culture in that program. And I think this is the game. This is a culture game too. It's like, who wants to be there? I think Iowa State does. I totally agree. I don't love playing Memphis and Memphis. I don't think the staff loves that you have to play Memphis and Memphis again. But this staff and team has really thrived on when you start to question them is when they're really good. And I think with Rocco leading the way and all the guys coming back, this is game one of the 2024 season. That's really just more of an exhibition at the end of the day, but not emotionally. Because if you go into next season with 8 wins after winning another de facto road game, then you start getting attention as potentially a Big 12 contender next year and thus a playoff contender.
Let's do it. We'll see you in Memphis, buddy.
I'll be there. It looks like the weather's going to hold out as well, so that's great. So if you're still on the fence, drive down and come
down.
See us,
make a weekend of it. Get yourself a hotel and come on down and join us.
Plenty of beer available, everybody.
Are you getting any Ames Lager down there? Did you figure that out?
Not officially.
I know it's kind of illegal.
Not officially, but there will be some that people will be able to
just
find.
Floating around?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If you go around the tailgate lots, send me a message. We'll find you.
He is Brent Blum. I really want to thank Jeff Woody for joining me. Aiden Wyatt and Matt Van Winkle had their hands all over production with this thing. We appreciate it. And again, it's interesting, Brent. I was thinking about this earlier in the week about when we used to do the bowl game thing, and you would do like the instant reaction with the statistical breakdown. And now, we're a few days away from the game, and I don't really know anything about the opponent other than, right? Like, it's just, the whole thing is just so backwards as to what it used to be. But I'm very thankful that we can go down there, at least from an Iowa State standpoint, and know that all this really matters, which is what more could you ask for in 2023?
No doubt. I mean, for a December that can be filled with drama, Iowa State hasn't had much drama, and you can focus on the football game, and that's exactly where you want to be the week of the game. And excited to see the guys. And I think the great part for the fans is Iowa State has some rising superstars on this team, so you get a 13th chance to watch this team. You feel for the seniors. Last time, a lot of them will play in a Cyclone uniform, so you hope for guys like Gary Vaughn and those guys that they come out and have a huge game. And maybe Easton Dean can do something, but last chance to see some of those guys. But also, again, the momentum for Iowa State football is real. So let's keep it up. Hope to see everybody in Memphis, and we'll have a great old time there on Beale Street.
He's Brent Blum. My name is Chris Williams. For Jeff Woody, Aiden Wyatt, and Matt Van Winkle, thank you for watching our Liberty Bowl preview show here on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network, YouTube, wherever you took this thing in. We appreciate our great sponsors, Fairway Meat and Grocery, Carl Auto Group, Wild Rose Casino, and Keen Project Solutions. We'll be back later this week